In an isolated field of a luxurious rural property, two 5-year-old twin girls cry desperately while being forced to remain buried up to their necks. Their father, a millionaire businessman wearing a blue suit, smiles coldly while throwing dirt around them, claiming it's a special game. The children, terrified and unable to understand the cruelty, beg to get out, but he ignores their screams. On the other side of the field, a majestic white horse observes the scene with intelligent eyes, sensing that something terrible is happening. When the animal decides to act to protect the girls, what it does shocks everyone. Before we continue, if you love animals as much as we do, subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss any more moving stories. Thank you. Now let's get back to our story. The afternoon sun gilded the sprawling fields of the country estate, casting long shadows that danced gently with the breeze. On the horizon, the imposing mansion shone like a jewel set in the verdant landscape, a symbol of an empire built on sweat, ambition, and a few questionable decisions. But here, in this secluded field, far from prying eyes and listening ears, a scene was unfolding that contrasted sharply with the serene beauty of the twilight. Edward Pierce adjusted the knot of his blue silk tie, his fingers trembling slightly as he watched the two small figures before him. The 5-year-old twins, Luna and Stella, laughed and played in the soft soil, their white dresses already stained brown, their blonde hair tousled by the wind. They were the perfect picture of innocence, with bright blue eyes that mirrored the blind trust they placed in the man they called Daddy. "Girls, are you ready for our special game?" Edward's voice sounded forcedly cheerful, like an actor trying to convince an audience of a play he didn't believe in. He held a small shovel in his hands, the metal reflecting the last rays of sun, like a dark mirror. Luna clapped her hands, her eyes shining with excitement. "What kind of game, Daddy? Is it like the ones Mommy used to play with us?" The mention of the late Isabella made Edward swallow hard, a pang of something that might have been remorse, piercing his chest like a cold blade. "It's different, sweetheart. It's a game only special daddies can play with their special daughters." Edward forced a smile, but his eyes remained cold, calculating. "You're going to be hidden treasures, and I'm going to cover you with the magic earth from this field. Then I'll go away for a little while, and when I come back, we'll see if I can find my precious treasures." Stella furrowed her little brow, a look of doubt crossing her angelic face. "But Daddy, what if we get scared? What if it gets too dark?" Her voice carried a genuine childish concern, but also a primal instinct she couldn't yet name. "Don't you worry, girls. Daddy always comes back for his treasures." The words left his mouth like bitter honey, sweet on the surface but laden with a lie he couldn't quite swallow himself. His eyes darted to the distant mansion, where Victoria, his new wife, was surely waiting impatiently for confirmation that the problem had been solved. Edward began to dig small holes in the earth, each movement of the shovel echoing in the quiet field like hammer blows on an anvil. Sweat trickled down his forehead, staining the immaculate collar of his Italian shirt. His hands, accustomed to holding million-dollar contracts and sealing fates with handshakes, were now digging what he hoped would be the end of his complications. "Lie down here, my princesses. I'm going to cover you up very slowly, like your magic seeds that will grow into something beautiful." His voice caught slightly on the last word, but he quickly recovered, maintaining the facade of the game. The girls obeyed, lying down in the shallow holes with the absolute trust of those who have never questioned a father's love. Luna reached out to touch Stella's hand, their small fingers intertwining in an instinctive show of unity and mutual protection. As Edward began to toss handfuls of dirt over the girls, slowly covering their small bodies, a movement on the horizon caught his attention. A magnificent white horse was galloping toward the field, its mane flowing like silver waves in the wind. The animal stopped at a distance, its nostrils flared, as if it sensed something it couldn't comprehend, but which awakened all its instincts of alarm. Edward ignored the horse, concentrating on his macabre task. He couldn't turn back now. Not when he was so close to solving everything. The dirt continued to fall on the girls' small bodies in ever larger handfuls, first covering their legs, then rising toward their chests. Luna tried to stay still, as her father had instructed, but she couldn't suppress the small tremors that ran through her body. It wasn't cold, as the sun still warmed the field, but there was something in the atmosphere that set off silent alarms in her childish instincts. "Daddy, the dirt is getting in my mouth," Stella murmured, spitting out small grains of sand that had slipped between her parted lips. Her hands remained entwined with her sister's, a bond that kept them brave, even in the face of the unknown. Edward paused for a moment, looking at his half-buried daughters. For a split second, something flickered in his gaze, as if a forgotten part of his humanity was trying to surface. But then the image of Victoria in her wedding dress, the promise of a life without complications, and the bank account numbers his new wife would bring to their union, all dominated his thoughts once more. "It's just for a little bit, my love. Soon you'll understand it's all part of the game." His voice came out hoarser than he intended, betraying the tension that was coiling in his chest like a snake. The white horse took a few more steps closer, its large hooves marking the soft ground with feline precision. It was a magnificent animal, with defined muscles under its glossy coat and dark eyes that seemed to hold an almost human intelligence. Its ears twitched constantly, catching every sound, every shift in the environment. There was something in the animal's posture that suggested a growing agitation, as if it could sense the situation in a way that transcended the common instinct of horses. "Why is that horse looking at us like that, Daddy?" Luna asked, trying to turn her head to get a better look at the majestic animal. The dirt around her neck restricted her movement, creating a claustrophobic sensation she couldn't yet name. Edward cast an irritated glance in the horse's direction. "Don't worry about him, Princess. Horses are just curious, that's all. He'll go away soon and let us play in peace." But even as he spoke, Edward felt a growing unease with the animal's presence. There was something in the way the horse watched them that made him feel exposed, judged. With every handful of dirt he threw on the girls, Edward felt his heart beat faster, not with emotion or regret, but with anxiety to finish the unpleasant task. His expensive clothes were soiled, his impeccable fingernails now had dirt under them, and the sweat running down his face left salty trails that stung his eyes. "Daddy, when are you coming back to get us out?" Stella questioned, her small voice carrying a hint of insecurity that hadn't been there minutes before. Something in her childish instinct was beginning to process that this game was not like the others. Edward swallowed hard, his hands hesitating for a moment before continuing to cover the girls. "Soon, my love. Daddy has to go take care of some important things, but then he'll come back to find his precious treasures." The lie came more easily now, as if he were rehearsing a part he needed to memorize. The white horse suddenly neighed loudly, a sound that echoed across the field like a warning cry. The animal began to pace in circles around the scene, clearly agitated. Its nostrils flared and contracted rapidly, as if trying to decipher scents that made no sense, combinations of fear, despair, and something darker that hung in the air like an invisible cloud. Edward stopped completely this time, glaring at the horse with growing irritation. "Damn animal," he muttered under his breath, too low for the girls to hear. The horse's presence was starting to affect his concentration, making him question if this spot was truly as isolated as he had thought. The girls were now covered up to their chests, only their faces and shoulders visible above the dark earth. They looked like two small flowers sprouting from the soil, delicate and vulnerable, but there was something in both their eyes that was beginning to change, a primitive understanding that perhaps this wasn't just an innocent game. The silence of the field was broken only by the rhythmic sound of Edward's panting breath and the soft noises the earth made as it was poured over. The girls, Luna and Stella, were now buried up to their necks, their pale faces contrasting dramatically with the dark soil that surrounded them. Small tears began to form in the corners of Stella's eyes, not from physical pain, but from a profound confusion her young mind couldn't fully process. "Daddy, I don't like this game anymore," Luna whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Can I get out now? The dirt feels too heavy on my chest." Her words carried a vulnerability that made something twist in Edward's stomach, a feeling he quickly suppressed. Edward wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his dirty hand, leaving a dark smudge on his tanned skin. His eyes deliberately avoided his daughter's faces, focusing instead on his trembling hands holding the shovel. "Just a little longer, my princesses. The most valuable treasures are always the best hidden." His voice sounded mechanically cheerful, like a wind-up doll repeating the same rehearsed line. The white horse had stopped pacing and now stood directly between Edward and the exit of the field, as if it had made a conscious decision. Its dark eyes were fixed on the man in the soiled suit, and there was something almost human in the intensity of its gaze. The animal snorted loudly, stomping one of its front hooves on the ground with enough force to make the earth tremble slightly. "Why is he doing that, Daddy?" Stella asked, trying to turn her head toward the horse, but the dirt around her neck made the movement nearly impossible. "He looks angry. Do horses get angry when people do bad things?" The innocent question hit Edward like a punch to the gut. He glanced quickly at Stella, his eyes meeting hers for a split second before looking away again. "Horses don't understand games, my love. He'll calm down soon." But the horse seemed to have no intention of calming down. On the contrary, its agitation grew with each passing minute. The animal began to paw at the ground, kicking dirt back in aggressive motions. Its neigh echoed across the field again, this time louder and more prolonged, like a cry of protest that seemed to carry all the indignation the girls themselves could not yet express. Edward checked his expensive watch, the gold hands indicating that time was passing more slowly than he would have liked. Victoria would be waiting for his call, confirming that everything had been resolved. The new life they had planned together depended on this afternoon, this moment, this decision he had to see through to the end. "Girls, Daddy has to go now," he said, finally mustering the courage to look directly at his daughters. "You'll stay here quietly, like obedient treasures, and I'll be back soon to get you. I promise that when I return, we'll have the biggest party you've ever seen." Luna tried to reach a hand toward her father, but her arms were completely immobilized by the compacted earth. "Don't go, Daddy, please. I promise I'll be more obedient. Stella and I will be the best-behaved girls in the world." Her voice broke on the last word, and a single tear rolled down her dirty cheek. Edward felt something break inside his chest, but he forced himself to remain firm. He had come too far to turn back now. With quick steps, he headed toward his luxury car parked at the edge of the field, ignoring the increasingly desperate cries of the girls behind him. "Daddy, come back! Daddy, don't leave!" Stella was crying openly now, her voice echoing across the empty field like a ghostly wail. "Luna, he's really leaving! Why is he leaving?" The white horse watched Edward walk away, its muscles taut like violin strings about to snap. The moment the man passed him, the animal made a decision that would change the course of everything to come. The world seemed to stop in that moment. Edward walked toward his car with determined steps, but each yard he covered weighed on his shoulders like a mountain. Behind him, the girls' desperate cries cut through the air like sharp blades, each word an echo of his own conscience trying to scream for mercy. "Daddy, please! We can't get out. The dirt is too heavy." Luna's voice was now filled with real panic. The game long forgotten in the face of the terrifying reality of being trapped, immobilized, abandoned. Her small fingernails tried to scratch at the earth around her shoulders, but it was useless. They were completely at the mercy of the situation. The white horse watched Edward for a few more seconds, as if calculating, assessing, making a decision that transcended common animal instinct. Its dark eyes gleamed with a determination that seemed almost supernatural. Then, without warning, the animal lunged into motion. Edward had just reached his Mercedes when he heard the unmistakable sound of hooves pounding the ground at a rapid pace. He turned instinctively, and his eyes widened in terror as he saw a wall of white muscle and flowing mane coming toward him like a living projectile. The horse galloped with a fury that seemed to channel all the injustice of the world into its powerful movements. "No, no, no!" Edward screamed, trying desperately to open the car door. His hands were shaking so much he couldn't find the handle, his fingers slipping on the polished metal as if it were coated in ice. The sound of hooves grew closer, each beat echoing in his ears like war drums. The impact was devastating. The horse struck Edward with the force of a moving train, throwing him away from the car as if he were a rag doll. The man rolled across the ground several times before coming to a stop, his blue suit torn and filthy, his expensive clothes now indistinguishable from a beggar's rags. Excruciating pain shot through his body like electric shocks, and he could feel something warm trickling down his forehead. "Help!" Edward screamed, trying to get up, but his legs wouldn't obey his brain's commands. The horse approached again, this time more slowly, but with the same menacing intensity. The animal snorted loudly, its flared nostrils exhaling vapor into the afternoon air, like a dragon ready to strike again. The girls, even in their desperate situation, watched the scene with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Luna, what did the horse do to Daddy?" Stella whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of her own sobs. "I think he was protecting us," Luna replied, a strange wisdom shining in her childish eyes. "I think he knew Daddy wasn't really coming back." Edward finally managed to get to his feet, staggering like a drunk. Blood streamed from a cut on his forehead, further staining his expensive shirt. His eyes were wild with fear and pain, and he looked at the horse as if he were seeing a materialized demon. The animal remained between him and the girls, clearly determined not to let him get close again. All right," Edward yelled at the horse, his hands raised in surrender. "I'm leaving, just let me go." His voice was broken, all previous arrogance and coldness replaced by pure terror. The horse watched him for a long moment, as if assessing the sincerity of his words. Then slowly, it took a few steps to the side, creating a narrow corridor between it and the car. Edward didn't waste any time. Scrambling awkwardly, he managed to reach the vehicle and get inside quickly, locking the doors as if they could protect him from the animal's fury. The engine roared to life, and the luxury car sped away, kicking up a cloud of dust that hung in the air like a curtain of smoke. Edward had managed to escape, but not as he had planned. He had fled like a wounded coward, leaving the girls exactly where he wanted them, but without the cold satisfaction of a well-executed plan. The dust kicked up by the fleeing car took long minutes to settle, creating a golden curtain that filtered the last rays of the afternoon sun. When the air finally cleared, silence returned to the field, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was no longer the tense silence of conspiracy, but the protective silence of one standing guard. The white horse remained motionless for a few moments, its ears alert for any sound that might indicate the return of the man in the suit. Its muscles were still tense, ready for action, but it gradually began to relax as it became convinced that the immediate danger had passed. Then slowly, the magnificent animal turned toward the girls. Luna and Stella watched the horse with a mixture of awe and apprehension. They had witnessed its fury against their father, but now, approaching them, the animal radiated a completely different energy. Its movements were gentle, almost ceremonial, as if it understood the delicacy of the situation. "Is he going to hurt us?" Stella whispered, her eyes still swollen from crying. The dirt around her neck seemed to have grown even heavier, and she felt as if she were being slowly swallowed by the earth itself. Luna studied the approaching horse, her childish intuition picking up on something that transcended fear. "No. Stella, look at his eyes. They're kind eyes like Grandma's were." Her voice carried a confidence that contrasted dramatically with her vulnerable situation. The horse stopped a few feet from the girls, lowering its majestic head until its eyes were level with their faces. For a long moment, there seemed to be a silent communication between the animal and the children, a mutual understanding that needed no words. Then, the horse began to act in a way that surprised even the girls. With careful movements, it began to dig at the earth around Luna with one of its front hooves. Each movement was calculated, precise, as if the animal understood exactly what needed to be done. "He's trying to get us out," Luna exclaimed, her eyes shining with a hope that had been absent for hours. "Stella, he wants to help us." The horse worked tirelessly, alternating between the two girls. Its strength was impressive, but it controlled it carefully, making sure not to harm the fragile children. With each hoof full of dirt it removed, more space opened up around the girls' buried bodies. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink that reflected off the horse's white coat, making it look almost ethereal. The temperature started to drop, and the girls felt the chill seep into their bones through the damp earth. "Thank you, horsey," Stella murmured, her voice full of genuine gratitude. "You're very nice. What's your name?" She spoke to the animal as if it were a person, and somehow it felt natural to do so. The horse paused its work for a moment, as if listening, then snorted softly and returned to digging. There was something almost magical in the animal's dedication, a determination that went beyond common protective instinct. It was as if it had made a conscious decision to become the guardian of these two small, abandoned souls. As the hours passed, the horse managed to significantly loosen the earth around the girls. They could now move their arms, and the pressure on their chests had lessened considerably, but the animal didn't stop. It seemed determined to free them, completely, no matter how long it took. "Stella, do you think Daddy will come back?" Luna asked, her voice carrying a sadness no 5-year-old should know. Stella was silent for a long moment, watching the horse work tirelessly for their freedom. "I don't know, Luna, but I think we have a new friend now, and he won't abandon us like Daddy did." Night was falling, but the white horse continued its vigil, determined to protect the small children fate had placed in its care. The crescent moon had risen on the horizon when the horse finally managed to free Luna completely from the earth that imprisoned her. The girl emerged like a blossoming flower, her numb limbs tingling as circulation returned. She tried to stand, but her wobbly legs couldn't support her, causing her to collapse onto the soft ground. "Luna!" Stella cried with relief, watching her sister struggle to regain control of her own body. "You did it! You're free!" The white horse immediately turned its attention back to Stella, intensifying its efforts to free her as well. Its hooves worked with renewed urgency, as if Luna's freedom had given new meaning to its mission. Beads of sweat glistened on its coat, but it showed no signs of fatigue or surrender. Luna finally managed to crawl over to where her sister was still partially buried. Her small hands began to help the horse, removing handfuls of dirt with fierce determination. "I'm getting you out of there, Stella. We're getting out of this place together." The collaboration between the girl and the animal created a powerful synergy. While the horse used its strength to remove the heavier layers of dirt, Luna worked on the smaller spaces, carefully freeing her twin sister's arms and torso. It was as if an ancient partnership had been reactivated, a coordinated dance between different species united by a common purpose. Almost there, Luna muttered, both to encourage Stella and to keep herself focused. Her small hands were scratched and bleeding slightly, but she didn't seem to notice the pain. All her attention was focused on freeing the most important person in her life. When Stella finally emerged from the earth, the two sisters hugged with an intensity that made the horse stop and watch. There was something deeply touching in that moment, a connection that transcended the terrible circumstances that had brought them there. They cried together, but now they were tears of relief, of gratitude, of survival. The horse approached the girls and gently nuzzled their heads, one at a time. The gesture was unmistakably affectionate, a silent blessing that sealed the bond that had formed between them. The girls stroked its silky face, whispering words of thanks that seemed to make the animal relax completely for the first time in hours. "How are we going to get home?" Stella asked, looking around the field now cloaked in darkness. The reality of their situation was beginning to set in. They were alone, lost, with no idea where they were or how to get to safety. Luna looked at the horse, which had lain down beside them like a living barrier against the dangers of the night. "I think our home is here now, with him, at least until we figure out what to do." The animal seemed to understand the conversation, for it positioned itself so the girls could snuggle against its warm body. Its coat served as a natural blanket, protecting them from the cold that was beginning to seep into the open field. The rhythmic sound of its breathing was comforting, a constant reminder that they were not completely alone in the world. "How? Do you think he knew we needed help?" Stella whispered, her small fingers entwined in the horse's silky mane. "Maybe the angels sent him," Luna replied with the profound simplicity only children possess. "Mommy always said that angels look after us when there's no one else." The stars shone brightly in the clear country sky, and the horse kept its silent vigil. They had survived the first test, but they instinctively knew their journey was just beginning. What they didn't know was that on the other side of the field, lights were slowly approaching, belonging to someone who would change their lives forever. The horse raised its head, its ears twitching in the direction of the distant sounds. Something was coming, and it needed to decide whether it represented a new threat or a new hope for its charges. The beam of a flashlight danced among the trees like a giant firefly, slowly approaching the field where the girls huddled against the white horse. The sound of careful steps on dry grass echoed in the quiet of the night, accompanied by the gruff voice of an old man calling for his pet. "Thor, where'd you get to, you rascal?" The voice carried genuine concern, but also a fatherly affection that immediately reassured the horse. Its ears pricked up in recognition of the familiar voice, but it remained protectively by the girls, sighed as if presenting them to its owner. When the flashlight beam finally reached the small group, the farmer, Henry, stopped abruptly. At 70, he had seen many strange things in his life, but two small, dirt-caked children hugging his horse in the middle of the night was definitely not one of them. His grandfatherly heart leaped in his chest, a mixture of compassion and alarm taking over his emotions. "My God," he murmured, slowly lowering the flashlight so as not to scare the girls. "Girls, are you all right? What happened here?" His voice was as soft as honey, laden with the patience only decades of life can teach. Luna and Stella looked at each other, unsure how to respond. The old man's figure seemed kind, but after the experience with their father, trust no longer came easily. Thor, sensing the girl's hesitation, rose gracefully and walked to his owner, nuzzling him gently as if trying to communicate something important. "Thor brought you here?" Henry asked, stroking the horse's neck with familiarity. "This animal has a special instinct for finding those who need help," His experienced eyes noticed the dirt caked on the girls' clothes, the filth in their hair, the clear signs that something very wrong had happened. "He saved us," Stella finally whispered, her voice barely audible above the night wind. "Our daddy left us and buried us in the dirt, but Thor dug us out." The words hit Henry like a lightning bolt. He had raised 5 children and buried a beloved wife, and in all his years he had never heard something so shocking from the mouth of a child. His expression hardened momentarily, not with anger at the girls, but with a deep indignation toward whoever had done this to them. "Buried," he repeated, trying to keep his voice calm so as not to alarm the children further. "You mean someone hurt you on purpose?" Luna nodded, fresh tears starting to roll down her dirty cheeks. "He said it was a hidden treasure game, but then he left and didn't come back. We were so scared, but Thor took care of us." Henry knelt slowly on the ground, bringing himself to the girl's level. His knees protested the movement, but he ignored the pain, focusing completely on the 2 small, wounded souls before him. "Do you know your names? Do you know where you live?" "I'm Luna, and this is Stella," Luna replied, pointing to her sister. "We used to live in a big house with Daddy, but he said we have a new mommy now who doesn't like us." The pieces of the puzzle began to form in Henry's experienced mind. He had heard rumors in town about a wealthy businessman who had recently remarried, something about family complications, but he never imagined it could be something as terrible as child abandonment. "Well, girls," he said, with a determination that surprised even himself, "you won't be spending another night out in the cold. My house is no palace, but it has warm beds, good food, and a lot of love to give." He held out a hand to each girl, his eyes shining with a tenderness they hadn't seen in a very long time. Thor neighed softly, as if approving of his owner's decision. The horse positioned itself behind the girls, as if gently guiding them toward the new life that was opening up before them. In that moment, under the infinite stars of the field, a new family was being born from the ashes of abandonment and cruelty. Henry's house was simple but welcoming, with wooden walls that told stories of decades of love and family memories. The yellowish light from the lamps created an atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the coldness of the mansion where the girls had grown up. Here, every piece of furniture seemed to have a soul. Every corner held a memory of laughter and conversations that echoed even in the quiet of the night. "First things first, a nice warm bath," Henry announced, leading the girls to a small but immaculate bathroom. "Then we'll see if I can find some clothes that fit you." His trembling hands prepared the water, testing the temperature with the care of someone who had bathed many small children throughout his life. Luna and Stella looked at each other, still hesitant. Henry's kindness seemed real, but their recent experiences had planted seeds of mistrust that wouldn't easily disappear. Thor, as if sensing their insecurity, appeared at the bathroom window, his large muzzle visible through the glass like a silent reminder that they were not alone. "Can the horse stay close?" Stella asked timidly, her small fingers still intertwined with Luna's. "He protects us. We don't want him to leave too." Henry smiled with a tenderness that made his heart ache. "Thor will stay right here, you can be sure of that. He's known this house for years and never abandons anyone who needs him." His words carried a conviction that reassured the girls more than any elaborate promise could. While the girls bathed, Henry walked to the kitchen, his steps echoing on the wooden floorboards that creaked familiarly under his feet. He opened cabinets that hadn't seen movement in months, searching for ingredients to prepare something nutritious for 2 children who clearly hadn't eaten properly in hours. The loneliness that had been his constant companion since the death of Clara, his wife, suddenly seemed less heavy. There were voices in the house again, needs to be met, small lives to protect. His experienced hands prepared oatmeal with honey, the same thing he used to make for his own children when they were small. "That smells really good," Luna commented when the girls appeared in the kitchen. Wearing flannel shirts Henry had found in a memory chest. The clothes were huge on them, but they were clean and warm, enveloping them like giant hugs. Henry served the oatmeal in small bowls, decorated with hand-painted flowers by Clara years ago. "My wife always said that food made with love has a special flavor," he commented, watching the girls eat with a voracious appetite. "I think you'll confirm whether she was right." Thor remained on the porch, visible through the kitchen's glass door. The horse seemed relaxed, but its eyes remained alert, like a sentry who never abandons his post. Occasionally, it would snort softly, and the girls would wave to it, a silent ritual that reaffirmed their special connection. "Mr. Henry," Stella said after finishing her oatmeal, "do you think our daddy will come back for us?" Her question carried a complex mixture of hope and fear, as if she didn't know which answer she preferred to hear. Henry chose his words carefully, knowing they would echo in the girls' memories for a long time. "I don't know, little one. But I know that as long as you're here, you'll be safe and loved. And if he does come back, we're going to have a very serious talk about how to treat precious children like you." His words contained a silent promise of protection that made the girls feel safer than they had in weeks. Thor neighed softly from the porch, as if approving of the farmer's words, sealing a pact of protection that would grow stronger with each passing day. 3 days had passed since the girls arrived at Henry's house, and a quiet routine had settled in among them. Luna and Stella would wake to the crowing of roosters, help feed the chickens, and spend the afternoons playing in the yard under Thor's protective gaze. It was a simple life, but filled with the love and attention they had long been missing. Henry noticed little things that worried him. The girls would startle at sudden noises, especially the sound of approaching cars. They ate as if each meal could be their last, and frequently asked if he really wouldn't leave them like their father had. Each question was a stab to his grandfatherly heart. "Girls, today I need to go to town to buy some things for you," he announced at breakfast. "Clothes that fit right, shoes, maybe some toys. Would you like to come with me?" The girls' expressions changed instantly. Fear replaced the tranquility they had found on the farm, and they looked at each other with visible anxiety. "What if we see Daddy there?" Luna whispered, her voice laced with an apprehension no child should know. "If we do, I'll be right beside you," Henry answered firmly. "No one is going to hurt you as long as I'm around. Thor can come with us too if it makes you feel safer." The presence of their protective horse sealed the deal. The girls agreed to go to town, but only if Thor could accompany them. Henry found the idea a bit unusual, but he had learned not to question the special connection between the children and the animal. In town, Henry realized he wasn't the only one curious about the girls' situation. Discreet glances followed them as they walked down the main streets, and he could hear whispers when people thought he wasn't paying attention. 2 unknown children with an old farmer was enough news to fuel a small town's gossip mill. "Henry, are these the girls you found lost?" asked Mrs. Gable, the owner of the clothing store, her eyes shining with barely concealed curiosity. "What a terrible story. Such little children all alone in the fields. Have you heard from their parents?" "We're still trying to locate the family," Henry replied diplomatically, his hands closing protectively on the girl's shoulders. He had decided to be careful about sharing details until he better understood the legal situation. While they were trying on clothes, Stella whispered to Luna, "People are talking about us. I think they know Daddy abandoned us." Her voice carried shame, as if she felt responsible for the situation. "It doesn't matter what they think," Luna replied with surprising wisdom for her age. "Mr. Henry really likes us. I can feel it." Outside the store, Thor waited patiently. but his ears twitched constantly, catching every sound, every approach. Some people stopped to admire the beautiful horse, but he remained focused only on the shop door, waiting for his charges. It was when they were leaving the pharmacy that Henry overheard the conversation that would change everything. Two men were commenting in low voices about a wealthy businessman who had been spreading the story that his daughters had disappeared during a walk on the family's country estate. "Edward Pierce is offering a reward for information," one of them was saying. "Says he's desperate to find the girls. What a dedicated father, right?" Henry felt his blood run cold. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in a way that filled him with alarm. If Edward Pierce was spreading a different version of the story, it meant he hadn't given up on the girls. Worse, it meant he was building a narrative that would make him look like the victim. Looking at Luna and Stella, who were playing innocently beside Thor, Henry made a decision that would define all of their futures. He needed help, and he needed it fast. It was a Saturday morning when fate knocked on Henry's farmhouse door. The sound of a luxury car's engine cut through the pastoral silence like a blade, making Thor lift his head in alarm and the girls run to the kitchen window. Luna and Stella let out small sounds of panic when they recognized the silver Mercedes, slowly approaching on the dirt road. "It's him," Stella whispered, grabbing Luna's arm hard enough to leave marks. "It's Daddy. He's come to get us." Henry felt every muscle in his body tense. He had spent the last few days trying to get legal advice on the situation, but the town lawyer had been vague about a farmer's rights regarding children found on his property. Now, faced with the reality of the biological father's arrival, Henry found himself navigating completely uncharted waters. "Stay inside, girls," he instructed with a calmness he didn't feel. "Don't come out until I say it's okay." Edward emerged from the car wearing an impeccable dark suit, his Italian shoes contrasting dramatically with the rural simplicity around him. His injuries from the encounter with Thor had healed, but they left a small scar on his forehead that he tried to conceal with his hair. His eyes swept the property until they found Henry on the porch. "Sir," Edward began, his voice laden with an emotion that seemed rehearsed, "I believe you're looking after my daughters. I'm Edward Pierce, and I'm desperate to bring them home." Henry slowly descended the porch steps, each movement calculated to show he wouldn't be easily intimidated. "They told me a very interesting story about how they got here, Mr. Pierce." Edward forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Children have such vivid imaginations, don't they? They got lost during a walk on the property, and I've been searching for them tirelessly. You can't imagine a father's desperation." It was at that moment that Thor appeared, moving with the silent grace of a predator. The horse positioned itself directly between Edward and the house, its posture radiating a hostility that was impossible to ignore. Its eyes fixed on the man in the suit, and a low, threatening sound rumbled in its throat. Edward flinched instinctively, his concerned father facade faltering for a moment. "That animal seems agitated. Perhaps it's best to keep him away while I get my daughters." "Thor has a keen instinct for people," Henry replied, carefully watching Edward's reactions. "He's rarely wrong about someone's character." Through the kitchen window, the girls watched the scene unfold with growing terror. Stella began to cry silently, and Luna hugged her protectively, whispering words of comfort she didn't quite believe herself. "Daddy looks different," Luna murmured. "His eyes are cold, like when he was burying us." Edward tried to move toward the house, but Thor blocked his path, snorting loudly. The horse clearly remembered their previous encounter, and its body language made it clear that Edward would not be welcome near the girls. "Mr. Pierce," Henry said carefully, "perhaps it would be better if we had a calm discussion about what really happened. The girls are safe and well cared for. There's no rush for anything." Edward checked his expensive watch, impatience beginning to seep through his mask of paternal concern. "They are my daughters, sir. I have legal rights to them. I cannot allow them to remain with strangers, however well-intentioned. The tension in the air was palpable, like the electricity before a storm. Thor continued his vigil, ready to act if necessary, while Henry weighed his limited options. In the window, two small girls waited to find out if the brief period of safety and love they had found was coming to an end. The standoff on the porch dragged on, each second feeling like an eternity. Edward tried to maintain his composure, but Thor's intimidating presence was clearly chipping away at his confidence. The horse never took its eyes off him, as if recording every micro-expression, every gesture, preparing to act if necessary. "Perhaps I should call the authorities," Edward said, trying to sound reasonable, but his voice carried a thinly veiled threat. "I'm sure they'll agree that the children belong with their biological father." Henry crossed his arms, his posture remaining firm. "Feel free to make that call, Mr. Pierce. I'm sure the authorities would also be interested in hearing the girls' version of how they ended up on my property." It was then that the kitchen door creaked open. Luna stepped out first, followed hesitantly by Stella. The girls walked until they stood beside Henry, their small hands finding his naturally. The transformation in Edward was instant and unsettling. His face lit up with a forced smile that contrasted sharply with the coldness that had been in his eyes moments before. "My princesses!" he exclaimed, opening his arms theatrically. "Daddy was so worried. Come, give Daddy a hug, he's missed you so much." But the girls didn't move. Instead, they pressed closer to Henry, Luna holding his hand tightly while Stella hid partly behind his leg. Their reaction was more eloquent than any words could be. "Come on, girls," Edward insisted, his voice starting to show signs of strain. "Don't be shy. Daddy came to take you home. Victoria is waiting to get to know you better." "She doesn't like us," Stella mumbled, her voice barely audible. "You said she doesn't like us, and that's why we played that game." Edward blinked rapidly, clearly not expecting the girls to remember specific details of his conversations. "Of course she likes you, darling. Sometimes adults say things they don't mean when they're upset." Luna looked directly at her father for the first time since he'd arrived. "Why didn't you come back to dig us out, Daddy? You promised you'd come back after the game." The question cut through the air like a blade. Edward hesitated for a fraction of a second too long, his eyes darting away from his daughters. I got lost trying to find you. The field is so big, and it got dark so fast. When I went back, you were gone." Thor snorted loudly, as if commenting on the veracity of the explanation. The sound made Edward take a step back, his loving father mask slipping for a moment. "Thor found us," Luna continued, her voice gaining strength. "He dug and dug until he got us out of the dirt. If you had really come back, you would have found us there." Henry watched the exchange between father and daughters with growing alarm. The girls' body language, the way they instinctively shied away from Edward, and especially Thor's protective reaction, were painting a very clear picture of what had truly happened in that field. "Girls, sometimes memory can play tricks on you," Edward said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "The important thing is that we're all together now. Let's go home and sort this all out as a family." "This is our home now," Stella said with a determination surprising for a 5-year-old. "Mr. Henry takes real care of us. He won't leave us all alone." The statement was like a slap in the face to Edward. His mask finally fell away completely, revealing the frustration and rage that had been simmering beneath the surface. Thor sensed the shift immediately, taking a step forward and positioning himself like a living barrier between Edward and the girls. "Enough of this charade," Edward said, his voice stripped of all pretense of paternal affection. "They are my daughters, and they're coming with me, whether they like it or not." The transformation in Edward was shocking to witness. The elegant, controlled man disappeared, replaced by someone desperate and dangerous. His eyes glinted with a fury that made the girls shrink even closer to Henry, their small bodies trembling with a visceral memory of what they had experienced at this man's hands. "Listen here, old man," Edward said, his voice low and menacing. "I don't know what game you're playing, but these children are my legal property. If you don't hand them over right now, I will make your life a living hell." Henry didn't back down an inch. "Property," he repeated, his voice thick with indignation. "Children aren't property, Mr. Pierce. They are human beings who deserve love and protection, not to be abandoned in a dark field." Thor moved even further forward, positioning himself almost directly in front of Edward. The horse was clearly agitated, its nostrils flared, muscles coiled like violin strings about to snap. It was as if the animal could feel the malice radiating from the man and was prepared to act as it had before. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Edward continued, pulling his phone from his pocket. "One call from me and you'll find out what it means to mess with someone who has resources and influence." It was then that a second voice cut through the tense air. "Edward, darling, don't you think you've caused enough trouble?" Everyone turned to see an elegant woman stepping out of a second car that had arrived silently during the confrontation. Victoria Pierce was a vision of sophistication, dressed in expensive clothes that screamed power and money. But there was something in her eyes that didn't match her flawless appearance, a mixture of guilt and determination that hinted at a profound internal shift. "Victoria," Edward stammered, clearly stunned by his wife's unexpected arrival. "What are you doing here? I told you to stay home." "I changed my mind," she replied, walking slowly toward the group. Her eyes fell on the girls, and for the first time, Henry saw something that could be genuine remorse in her expression. "After a lot of thinking, I decided I needed to see with my own eyes what you really did to these children." Edward paled visibly. "I don't know what you're talking about. I already explained it was all a misunderstanding, that they got lost during a walk." "Stop, Edward," Victoria interrupted him, her voice weary. "I know the truth. I always knew, and I can't pretend I don't anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. The girls looked between the adults with growing confusion, not fully understanding what was happening, but sensing instinctively that something fundamental was changing. "I saw you preparing that shovel that afternoon," Victoria continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I saw you choosing clothes that could be discarded. I knew what you were planning and I did nothing to stop it." Edward tried to speak, but she held up a hand to silence him. "But when you came home that night, injured and panicked, saying that a horse had ruined your plans, I saw something in your eyes that made me realize the monster I had married." Thor neighed softly, as if approving of the woman's words. The girls looked at each other, Luna whispering to Stella, "She's talking about when Thor saved us." "For these past few weeks," Victoria continued, "while you were spreading your lies around town about lost children, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't look in the mirror without seeing an accomplice." Edward was now visibly sweating, his composure completely shattered. "Victoria, you're talking nonsense. Everyone will think you've gone mad." "Maybe," she replied with surprising calm, "but I'd rather be seen as mad than as an accomplice to the attempted abandonment of helpless children." Henry held the girls' hands tighter, feeling that the moment of truth had finally arrived. The revelation unfolding before him confirmed his worst fears about Edward Pierce, but it also offered an unexpected hope for justice. Victoria's confession hung in the air like a sword over Edward's head. He looked alternately at his wife, the girls, and Henry, his calculating brain working desperately to find a way out of the trap he had set for himself. But Thor remained a physical reminder that some things cannot be overcome with money or influence. "You can't prove a thing," Edward finally said, his voice sounding more like a desperate plea than a statement of confidence. "It's just the word of a disturbed woman against that of a respected businessman." Victoria laughed bitterly, a humorless sound that echoed across the quiet yard. "Edward, do you really think I would come here unarmed?" She pulled a small digital recorder from her purse. "Our conversation from that night, when you came home, injured and furious, telling me how the horse had ruined your perfect plans. You detailed everything, darling, absolutely everything." Edward's face contorted into a mask of pure panic. He took a step toward his wife, but Thor immediately blocked his path, snorting with a threat that needed no translation. "That was recorded illegally," Edward shouted, his composure finally shattering completely. "No court would ever admit that as evidence." "Perhaps not," Henry intervened calmly, "but it will be more than enough to launch a proper investigation. And I'm sure that once the authorities dig a little deeper, they'll find other evidence." Luna looked up at Henry, her eyes wide and trusting. "Mr. Henry, does this mean we don't have to go back with him?" The simple, direct question cut through all the adult tension, reminding everyone what was truly at stake. It wasn't about business or reputations, but two small children who deserved safety and love. "It means you're going to stay right where you're safe and happy," Henry replied, kneeling to meet the girl's eyes, "and where people who truly love you can take care of you." Edward made one last desperate attempt. "They are my daughters. I have rights. You gave up any and all rights the moment you buried them in that field," Victoria answered, with a firmness that surprised even herself. "No real father dies before he hurts his children. You nearly killed them." Thor approached the girls, lowering his majestic head so they could stroke his muzzle. It was a gesture that symbolically sealed the protection he had offered from the very first moment. Luna and Stella hugged him, whispering words of gratitude that seemed to make the great animal relax completely for the first time in weeks. "What happens now?" Stella asked, looking between Henry and Victoria. Victoria knelt slowly, bringing herself to the girl's level. "Now I'm going to tell the authorities everything I know, and I'm going to make sure you stay with people who will truly love and care for you." She looked at Henry with genuine gratitude. "If you're willing, sir." "These girls have already found their place here," Henry replied, his hands resting protectively on Luna's and Stella's shoulders. "And I found the purpose that was missing in my life. It would be an honor to be officially responsible for them." Edward looked around at the circle of people who had united against him, his own wife, the stubborn farmer, two children he had tried to abandon, and a horse that seemed to personify his own guilty conscience. Finally, the reality of his situation crashed down on him. "You've destroyed my life," he said bitterly, walking slowly back to his car. "No," Victoria replied calmly. "You destroyed your own life the moment you chose to treat innocent children as disposable obstacles." As Edward drove away, possibly for the last time, Thor neighed softly, not in triumph, but as a simple declaration that justice had finally prevailed. 6 months later, the same field that had witnessed abandonment and terror now echoed with sounds of pure joy. Luna and Stella ran among the wildflowers that had bloomed with the arrival of spring, their laughter mixing with the birdsong in a symphony of renewed life. Thor galloped alongside them, no longer as a desperate protector, but as a joyful companion in a never-ending game. "Grandpa Henry! Grandpa Henry!" Luna shouted, running toward the porch where the farmer watched the scene with a smile that seemed to light up his entire wrinkled face. "Thor says he wants you to come play with us." Henry chuckled, a deep, genuine laugh that echoed across the fields like music. "Thor said that, did he? And how do you know what he's saying?" "We've always known," Stella answered with the seriousness only children can maintain when discussing the impossible. He has talking eyes, just like you do. Henry's heart warmed, as it always did when the girls called him Grandpa. The adoption had been finalized the month before, a process Victoria had facilitated with her testimony and evidence. Edward had not only lost custody of his daughters, but had also faced legal consequences that resulted in community service and court-mandated counseling. "Do you know what day it is today?" Henry asked, descending the porch steps to join the girls on the lawn. "It's the day Thor found us," the two exclaimed in unison, their faces glowing with the joy of a memory that was now a cause for celebration, not trauma. Henry had established the tradition of celebrating this day as Gratitude Day, when they would reflect on how their lives had changed and give thanks for the family they had become. It was a day to remember that even in the darkest circumstances, love and kindness can flourish. "And what else does this day mean?" he asked, kneeling on the soft grass. "It's the day we found our real family," Luna answered, hugging him tightly. "It's the day we learned that families aren't just about who shares your blood, but about who chooses to truly love you." Stella nodded vigorously, adding, "And it's the day we learned that angels sometimes have 4 legs and a white mane." The Thor approached the small family circle, lowering his majestic head to receive the affection he knew was coming. The scars from his past life had faded, replaced by the serene contentment of one who had found his true purpose. The afternoon sun gilded the field just as it had on that terrible day, months ago. But now the light felt different. Where there had once been coldness and abandonment, there was now warmth and belonging. The same soil that had nearly swallowed 2 innocent children now supported a vegetable garden they had planted with their own hands, each plant a declaration of hope for the future. "Grandpa," Stella said thoughtfully, "do you think our story will have a happily ever after?" Henry looked around at the property that now pulsed with new life. The girls playing, Thor grazing contentedly, the house that had transformed from a place of solitude into a home filled with love and laughter. "My dear," he replied, his voice thick with emotion, "our story isn't about a happy ending, it's about a happy beginning that continues every day." As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, the new family gathered on the porch to watch the spectacle. Luna and Stella leaned against Henry, while Thor stood nearby, an eternal sentinel who had transformed from a protector into an integral part of a family that proved true love transcends blood, circumstance, and even species. In the field where there was once despair, flowers now grew. Where there was abandonment, there was now unconditional love. And where 2 little girls had nearly lost their faith in human kindness, they discovered that the world still held enough magic to turn the worst experiences into blessings in disguise.